hair starts to glisten. Chemistry theory, the students will listen. Atoms and elements have a great ring. These are a few of my...
Hey guys, so we're getting towards the end of this chapter, chemistry, and I kind of started, well, I didn't kind of start, I started from the back of the chapter and worked my way up to the beginning of the chapter, just to kind of mix it up a little. And there were certain points that I wanted to discuss first before discussing the beginning of the chapter. Now, I've done quite a few videos on this chapter because there's so much to learn from chemistry, and honestly, this is just scratching the bare minimum surface of what we learn in cosmetology. But I think it's very important to our industry because not only do we work with chemicals all the time, but we can also become the chemist ourselves. We can have our own product line. And so that's why I love to really discuss these chapters. And I used to love to talk about it in theory because it opens your mind as a cosmetologist in training. You don't have to just stand behind the chair all day doing hair if you don't want to. You can do whatever you want. The possibilities are really endless. And I think I did a persuasion speech about this, just really telling what cosmetologists are made of and what we can do. It's awesome. I mean, and so when you get into the chemistry side, that's where your mind starts going, and you can have your own shampoo, your own conditioners, you can have your own makeup line. I have students that have their own eyelash line. So you can do whatever you want. You can make your own nail polishes. I know how to make nail polishes. And I've taught students how to make nail polish. I don't have my own nail polish line, but I know how to make it. So my point is all these things are at your fingertips if you want to. You can never, ever get bored as a cosmetologist. It's just that simple. You can't, because there's so much to do, So anyway, we're gonna try to wrap this up. Chemistry, what is it? It is the science that deals with the structures, the compositions, and the properties of matter when it changes under different conditions. So what is matter? Matter is anything that occupies space. So we are matter. It's really anything that you can see or touch except light and electricity. That's energy, and it doesn't occupy space. However, energy goes through a light bulb, right? So a light bulb would be the actual matter, but not the electricity that's going through it. So you could think of it like us. We're matter, we occupy space, but the electricity that's traveling through us, because we have a lot of energy traveling through us, is not matter. So even the smallest things like bacteria and viruses, they physically occupy space, so they are considered matter. So chemistry is that scientific side of that, where any changes that happens to us or anything else that's occupying space under different conditions, when it's changing, it deals with that. So that's what your chemistry is. So like when you apply a perm to the hair, we're talking like a relaxer to curly hair. It's the science behind that. What is it doing to that hair when it's breaking down those curls? So there's two types of chemistry. There's organic and then there's inorganic. Now don't be fooled by the term organic, because we're not talking about natural, healthy chemistry. It's just a term to describe that it's dealing with matter that has carbon in it, which means that it was either once alive or is alive. So some examples of what organic chemistry is: gasoline, motor oil. So we wouldn't drink that, right? But it is considered organic chemistry. Why? Because these products are made from things that was once alive. Don't ask me what it was made from, because I do not know that. I could research it, but I don't know that at this time. So those are examples. Even plastics are considered organic chemistry. And isn't that ironic, kind of, because it pollutes the environment, but then it's considered organic chemistry. So you understand what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that it's healthy for you. Inorganic contains hydrogen, not carbon. So it's not coming from anything that was alive or is alive. And some examples of inorganic is glass, minerals, even water, and hydroxide relaxers, sodium hydroxide relaxer. That's all considered inorganic because it's not coming from anything that was or is alive. Now let's talk about matter. Let's shift that back to matter a little bit. So matter comes in three forms. There's solids, liquids, and gases. So my biggest example that I love to share because it's the biggest universal thing, water. So water can come in a solid form, which is ice. The liquid form, what we drink, what we shower in, rain even, is the liquid. And then the gas is when you're boiling water and it turns to steam. So those are your three different types or shapes of matter. And then you have the changes that matter goes through. You have a physical change and then you have a chemical change. Now, physical change is where you are physically seeing that matter change, but it is still the same. So, for instance, water is one example. When you freeze water and it turns to ice, it's still H2O. And then when you liquefy it again or let that ice melt back into the liquid water, it's still H2O. And when you boil it, the steam is still H2O. So even though our eyes have witnessed it physically changing, it has not changed its chemical properties. Now, if we took H2O and we added another oxygen element to that, or another atom of oxygen to that, it becomes H2O2, which is now hydrogen peroxide. So if you've ever swished hydrogen peroxide in your mouth, like to whiten your teeth a little, if you really pay attention, it tastes like water with extra air in it. That's just my thought on that. To me, it tastes like airy water. And why? Because it is water with an extra molecule of, not molecule, but atom of oxygen. So now it's H2O2. Another example is when you physically see someone gain or lose weight. So if you see me gaining weight, am I still me? Yes, I'm still myself. I just have physically changed. Nothing has chemically changed me to where I am no longer Vonnie. But if you started seeing branches coming out of my neck and some fruit hanging from the branches that's coming out of my neck, well, something's going on where I am no longer chemically the makeup of Vonnie. That would be a chemical change. So that's it on that part. Now we're going to talk a little bit about elements, atoms, and molecules. And then we're going to wrap up chemistry, guys. Chemistry and how chemistry influences cosmetology. And you'll find that on pages 254 through 258, and this is the wrap up of chapter 12. So we talked about matter already, and you know that matter is anything that occupies space, everything that you can see or touch except for electricity and light. So the examples, you and me matter. Your textbooks are matter. Your teacher matters. Solutions matter. Elements are the simplest form of matter. So let's backtrack. I remember I told you that we are matter, right? And within us, we have elements that make us up. Now, your textbook mentions cones. At least it used to. Cones are some of the 5 elements that make us up. That's carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, and sulfur. You'll find that throughout our hair and our nails and our skin, which is us, of course. Now, here's the thing about elements. They cannot be broken down any further than what they are without changing the properties of that element. So it means that it would no longer be that element. In other words, hydrogen taken away from hydrogen doesn't equal hydrogen. So if you started going through the hydrogen element and trying to break it down further so that it'd be a little mini hydrogen, and become something else and still be hydrogen, that would not be. So that's an element. There are 118 known elements according to your text. Now, I personally think there may be more. I'm not positive. I just remember the periodic table growing up. You know, I think in middle schools when we started looking at the table chart of elements, and it seemed like there was a lot more. Maybe not, maybe so. But your elements are identified by a letter or a symbol. So an atom is the basic unit of matter. And I don't know why this came into my brain, but all I can think of was a chocolate bar as your element. And we just are going to make up a pretend letter for the element of the chocolate bar, which is CO. Now, if you take a bite out of the chocolate bar, the bite of your bar is what we would call the atom, because it's a little tiny snippet of the element, which is the chocolate bar, right? And so within that, it's still the CO, just a smaller piece. And within that smaller piece, you have a nucleus and you have particles that are charged positive and negatively. The negative ones is what orbits around that nucleus. And so those are called electrons. The positively charged particles, which the number of those actually is what gives the element or makes the element, is called protons. And then the particles that have no charge is called neutrons. So I kind of think of it as a cell because the nucleus makes me think of cells that we have in our body. But also you can think of it as like a tiny solar system with the nucleus kind of being the sun. And then you have the orbiting planets going around, which is the electrons. And those are the negative charged ones. And then you have the protons and the neutrons. Now, here's a little fun fact for you about electrons. Electrons actually is what makes up electricity. So that would be the negative energy. Go figure. Molecules are a combination of atoms, or you could also think of it as a chemical in its simplest form. So water is a chemical, hydrogen peroxide is a chemical, and water in its simplest form would be H2O. That's 2 parts of the hydrogen, remember, which is an element, and 1 part of oxygen, which is an element. And you take a small snippet of that element, which is still oxygen, but it's just a smaller piece. And then you take 2 little snippets of the hydrogen element, and those are your atoms. And when you combine them together, now you have water. Now, if I took another part of oxygen and added it to the 2 parts hydrogen and the 1 part oxygen, now I've made hydrogen peroxide. And these are molecules that make up the chemicals that we work with, right? But it's in its simplest form. So these are ways to remember what molecules are. And that's the conclusion to chemistry, guys. So just remember that chemistry can change your life and that we are so much more than what people think we are. Cosmetologists and cosmetology is an amazing career. and we learn so much to make people look and feel beautiful. It's all about changing lives. And honestly, if standing behind the chair is not something you really want to do, consider making your own products. Consider having your own hair color line, your own shampoos and conditioners. The first real organic shampoo and conditioner that doesn't have anything in it that could cause you harm. So just keep that in mind, and thank you so much for your support. And stay tuned for more videos. Bye, guys.